Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Before you drift off, it would be a nice idea if you could leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from. Please don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Right, let's get comfy and relaxed, and let's begin. Story 1. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of black silk, pinched by faded white lines that glowed faintly under the dull beam of my headlights. I took a deep breath and tried to shake off the weariness that had settled into my shoulders like a weight. Driving through the night wasn't exactly thrilling, but it was necessary. I'd left my friend's place hours ago, a little later than I wanted, and now I was barreling down this stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, the kind of place where towns blink out on maps like afterthoughts. The radio was dead. No signal. Just static fuzz that buzzed briefly before cutting out completely. I fiddled with the dial, hoping for anything, but the silence returned immediately. The car's heater spat a weak puff of warm air that did nothing to chase away the chill creeping along the back of my neck. Ahead, the road was empty. I wasn't surprised. The highway was more of a connector between small towns than a main artery, and at this hour, I suppose the only other traffic would be trucks hauling goods or the occasional insomniac like me. That's when I noticed the headlights. At first, I thought it was just a trick of my tired eyes, maybe a reflection bouncing off a roadside sign or the flicker of a passing animal. But no, the lights were steady, a pair of dull yellow glows that appeared behind me, slow and deliberate. I checked the rearview mirror, squinting against the glare. There it was, a sedan with its low beams on, maintaining a steady distance. Not too close, but not far enough to be insignificant. I felt a prickling at the base of my skull, that familiar flicker of discomfort when something felt off but couldn't be pinned down. I tapped the accelerator. The speedometer climbed 65, 75, 80 miles per hour. The car behind me adjusted effortlessly, matching my pace, the distance between us stubbornly the same. I slowed down, then sped up again, weaving slightly as if to test whether it was following me or just coincidentally traveling the same route. Still there. Same distance. Same unchanging headlights. I told myself it was probably a coincidence. Maybe someone else was lost, or just as eager to get home. Rational thoughts, but they did little to steady my shaking hands on the wheel. The road curved gently, the black asphalt slick with patches of dew. The night smelled faintly of damp earth and pine, a mixture that reminded me of childhood camping trips, of simpler times. The scent was oddly comforting, and yet, with the car still behind me, it felt more like a trap tightening. I reached for my phone, thumb hunting for the screen to light up. The battery icon blinked red. 40%. 30. I plugged it into the charger, but the percentage didn't budge. 30. 25. Then, with an almost theatrical finality, the screen went black. Great, I muttered, my voice rough and low. The charger cable felt flimsy in my hand, like it had lost its purpose. I tried again. Nothing. The GPS app was still open, frozen on a tiny dot that represented my car, drifting along the highway. I tapped the screen, but the map refused to update. The blue dot stayed stubbornly in place as if I were parked, not moving at all. I glanced in the mirror again. The car was still there, not closing the gap, not falling back. Just there. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows. Leaves skittered across the road, crunching under my tires. A distant dog barked, sharp and urgent. The sound echoed and then faded into the night. Silence. Complete silence. My breath caught. I realized I hadn't exhaled in a long time. I tried to shake the feeling that I was being watched, though that was ridiculous. I was alone out here. Alone except for that car. The highway sign ahead flickered weakly. Next service is 36 miles. No gas stations, no rest stops, no open diners. Just miles and miles of empty road. I checked the fuel gauge. Half a tank. Enough to get home, but only just. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but my phone was dead. No signal, no battery, no hope. The car behind me flashed its headlights once. Twice. Then held the low beam steady again. I blinked and rubbed my temples. Was I imagining this? Was I tired enough to conjure up a phantom driver? I told myself to focus, to stay calm. I could just speed up and lose them. But every time I increased my speed, the car matched me without effort, like a shadow glued to my tail. It wasn't a game. Not a coincidence. Not luck. Something was wrong. I tried the radio again. Static. Nothing but static. The smell of peppermint gum lingered in my mouth, dry and artificial. I wanted to pull over, to stop and see if the car would stop too. But where? There was no shoulder, just gravel and shadowed trees pressing close to the roadside. I reached down to open the glove compartment, fingers brushing against a crumpled map I'd shoved in there weeks ago. I pulled it out. The paper was brittle, edges softened by time and moisture. I unfolded it carefully, the sound sharp in the quiet cabin. The map showed the highway, the tiny dots of towns, and the thick swaths of forest on either side. No shortcuts. No exits between here and the next stop. I swallowed hard. The car behind me flashed its lights again, this time, a rapid series of 3 quick blinks. I forced myself to look away. Just a driver trying to get my attention, I told myself. Maybe they were lost, maybe they needed help. But the steady, unyielding presence made my stomach twist. The road ahead dipped slightly into a shallow valley, and I caught sight of a flickering yellow light far off to the right. A gas station? A diner? My pulse quickened. I made a decision. I would get there. I would find a place to stop, to breathe, to figure out what this was. I adjusted the wheel, preparing to accelerate. And then the car behind me blinked its headlights again, slower this time. A deliberate signal. I kept my eyes on the road and pressed down on the gas pedal. The night swallowed the sound of the engine, the hum of tires on asphalt, and the quiet, unshakable presence behind me. The gas station's flickering yellow light seemed to grow closer, but the car behind me held its place like a shadow glued to my rearview mirror. I glanced again at the rearview mirror. The car was there, exactly where it had been. No closing in, no falling back. Just relentless, constant. It wasn't slowing down, wasn't speeding up. I wondered if the driver was watching me, too. There was no way to shake the feeling it was deliberate. The blinking headlights from before weren't some random flicker. Someone wanted me to know they were there. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. The gas station was close now, a lonely building with a peeling sign and one flickering bulb above the door. The parking lot was empty except for a single rusted pickup truck, its paint dull under the weak light. No one else around. Perfectly still. I thought about stopping, but the car behind me stayed put. That steady, unnerving presence. I took a deep breath, gripping the wheel tighter. Okay, I muttered to myself. Let's see what you want. I slowed, then braked gently to pull into the lot. The other car followed exactly, pulling in behind me with smooth precision. It was a dark-colored sedan, maybe midnight blue or black, it was hard to tell in the dim light. The headlights went out as it settled in place, but the shape stayed visible, looming close. I sat still for a moment, engine idling, eyes flicking between the gas station and the car behind. The door to the station creaked open, a bell tinkling weakly in the silence. A woman stepped out, hands shoved deep in her jacket pockets, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She paused, looking toward my car, then at the other vehicle. "Hey," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "You see that car back there? The one following me?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. Been hanging around that stretch for hours now. Not the first time folks mention it." Her voice was low, a bit rough, like she hadn't spoken much all day. I frowned. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, glancing over her shoulder, eyes sharp despite the tired lines on her face. "People come through here late, see the same car behind them. Keeps pace no matter what. No one knows whose it is. No plates, no name. Just there." I swallowed again. "You're joking." "Wish I was." She pulled a pack of gum from her pocket and popped a piece in her mouth. "You want coffee? Could use some company." I nodded, stepping out into the cool night air. The smell of stale coffee and oil hit me immediately. The station's interior was cramped and cluttered, fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. I grabbed a cup from the machine, the cardboard rough against my fingers. "Have you called the cops?" I asked as we sat on a cracked bench outside. She shook her head. "Why bother? They say it's probably a prankster, someone trolling. But no one's ever caught up to it. No reports. Just stories." Her eyes, dark and serious, fixed on the empty road ahead. "I don't like it. Something's off." I took a sip of the bitter coffee, feeling it burn down my throat and momentarily chase the cold away. My hands trembled slightly. The thought of being followed all night, with no explanation, was starting to wear on me. "Did you see the driver?" I asked. She shook her head again. "Never. The car's windows are always tinted dark, even at night. And the plate's never there. Whoever it is, they don't want to be seen." I chewed my lip, eyes drifting back outside. The road stretched out, a black ribbon swallowed by trees. The only sound was the occasional hum of a passing insect or the distant scrape of wind through branches. "Have you talked to anyone else? Other drivers?" I asked. A faint smile tugged at her lips. "Yeah. A handful. They say the same thing. That car's like a ghost, always there, but never close enough to catch. Like it's waiting for something." I swallowed hard, the words sinking in. Waiting for what? Me? Or something else? Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, relief flooding me. It was still alive. A message from my sister. "Are you there? Call me." I hit the call button, but the screen flickered and died mid-ring. Battery dead. I stared at the black screen, disbelief twisting my stomach. "No signal," I murmured, flipping the phone over. "Great." The woman watched me, expression unreadable. "That's been happening to a lot of people out here. Phones die. GPS cuts out. Like the place wants to keep you lost." I laughed bitterly. "You're making this sound like a horror movie." She shrugged. "Maybe it is. But it's real." The car behind us didn't move. I kept glancing back, every time convinced it had edged closer. But no! The distance stayed the same, stubborn and cold. I stood up, the coffee now cold in my hand. "I'm going to walk around. See if I can find a payphone or something." She nodded. Be careful. Don't stray too far. The night air was sharp against my skin as I stepped away from the station, the crunch of gravel underfoot loud in the stillness. I walked toward the road, eyes scanning the dark line where trees met sky. The car was there, headlights off, engine silent. Watching. The hairs on my neck prickled. The forest around smelled of damp earth and pine needles, but there was something else, faint and metallic, like iron and rust. I stopped, heart hammering. The silence was thick. Complete. Then, from somewhere deep in the woods, a branch snapped. I spun around, breath catching. Nothing. Just shadows and the rustle of leaves. I wanted to laugh at myself, but the tremor in my hands wouldn't let me. Back at the gas station, the woman's eyes met mine. You see that? She whispered. I nodded once, trying to steady my breathing. We're not just dealing with a driver, she said slowly. There's something else out here. Something waiting. The headlights of the car flicked on suddenly, blinding in the dark. The engine roared, louder than it had before, and it started rolling forward. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted to the cracked pavement. The car stopped just short of the gas station's edge. The window rolled down, a shadowed face peering out. No words. No movement beyond that brief glance. Just a stare that felt like ice pressing through the glass. Then the car sped off down the road, disappearing quickly into the night. I waited, heart thudding, the silence swallowing everything again. The woman's voice broke through, quiet but fierce. That's your warning. Warning? I echoed, voice barely a whisper. She nodded. Whatever's out here doesn't want you stopping. Doesn't want you looking. You're not safe. The road stretched out ahead, dark and endless. I looked back once more, but the car was gone. For now. I didn't know what I was running from. Or toward. But I knew I couldn't stay. Not here. Not yet. The road ahead was nothing but black, a gaping maw stretching on, swallowing the faint glow of the gas station behind me. I stared into that darkness, my fingers curling tight around the steering wheel, knuckles white enough to leave dents in the plastic. The woman's words echoed in my ears. That's your warning. Whatever's out here doesn't want you stopping. Doesn't want you looking. You're not safe. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was a rule, a boundary I was about to cross whether I liked it or not. I could still feel the weight of that icy stare from the car, just a silhouette at the window, like a shape carved out of shadow. No words. No movement. Just that unbearable quiet, a silence so thick it pressed down on my chest. I blinked, the sting of tears I hadn't noticed rising making my vision blur. I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat. God, I wanted to turn around and run. But the truth was, I couldn't. Not anymore. The engine had started again, louder this time, and the car vanished into the night like a ghost. I kept my eyes fixed on the spot where it had been, half expecting it to reappear like some bad dream. But all that remained was the hum of the highway and the distant, intermittent flicker of a roadside sign struggling against the wind. I pressed my foot down harder on the gas. The needle inched toward red, the car straining to outrun the invisible pursuer I'd been aware of for hours now. The headlights ahead cut through the night, but not enough to dispel the growing sense of wrongness clawing at my skin. The GPS was still dead. My phone had died somewhere back at the gas station, the battery draining faster than I could have imagined with no signal to recharge it. I'd been driving blind into something, and every mile I put behind only tightened the noose. As the miles ticked by, I caught myself glancing in the rearview mirror more times than I'd like to admit. The car was still there, a dim pair of headlights that never blinked away. I tried to speed up, then slowed down, weaving slightly between the lanes to throw it off. Nothing. It followed. Steady. Constant. Like it was measuring me, marking every move. I pulled my jacket tighter around me as a sudden chill crawled up my spine, the night air seeping in through the cracked window. The smell of wet asphalt and burnt rubber mingled with the stale scent of upholstery and faint traces of cold sweat. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once, sharp and urgent, then silence swallowed the sound. I wasn't sure how long I drove like that, minutes, maybe an hour. Time warped out here, stretched thin like the cracked lines on the road. My fingers trembled as I reached over to the center console, fumbling blindly for the flashlight I'd grabbed in the gas station. The beam cut a thin, shaky line through the darkness inside the car. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, pale face, eyes wide and rimmed red, hair stuck to my forehead in damp strands. Something wasn't right. I knew that much. This wasn't just some random driver with a grudge or a loner messing with me for kicks. The way the car kept pace, the way it had appeared at the gas station like a shadow bleeding into the light, it was deliberate. Calculated. Like I'd been marked. I swallowed the lump in my throat and tried to shake off the paranoia. Get a grip, I muttered aloud, voice cracking. You're just tired. You're imagining things. But the lie felt hollow. The truth was, I'd never felt more trapped in my life. The road curved sharply ahead, a bend that forced me to slow to a crawl. The headlights behind me followed suit, unwavering. That's when I saw it, a flash of something hanging from the rearview mirror in that car. A small doll, or maybe a charm, I couldn't make it out. It swung back and forth like a pendulum, catching the light in a way that made my stomach twist. I tried to focus on the road, but my eyes kept drifting back. The driver's face remained hidden in shadow, but the shape of the head was unmistakable. It was watching me. Waiting. Then the car did something different. It shifted lanes, pulling alongside me for a split second. I caught a glimpse of the driver's eyes, cold, unblinking, and impossibly calm. The kind of calm that makes your skin crawl because it means something darker lurks beneath. My breath hitched. Why? I whispered. What do you want? No answer. Only the hum of engines and the wind whipping past the windows. I glanced at the dashboard, still no GPS signal, still no phone. My only lifeline had gone dark, and with it, any hope of finding a safe route out. Ahead, the road stretched endlessly, a ribbon of black under the pale glow of a half moon. There was no turning back. Not now. A sudden movement caught my eye, a flicker of light far off to the right. At first, I thought it was another car, but it was stationary. A small, rusted sign leaned crookedly beside a cluster of dead trees, the paint peeling and faded. I squinted, trying to make out the words. Welcome to something. The rest was unreadable. I slowed, heart pounding as I debated whether to stop or keep going. The woman's warning rang in my mind again. Don't stop. Don't look. But curiosity gnawed at me. I needed to know. Just as I was about to pass, the car behind me flashed its lights rapidly, like a signal. Once, twice, 3 times. It wasn't an accident. They wanted me to see the sign. I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel so tightly my fingertips went numb. The air inside the car felt thick, almost suffocating. The temperature had dropped again. I could see my breath fogging the windshield. I made a decision, whether out of stubbornness or desperation. I pulled over just past the sign, heart hammering wildly, senses sharp and raw. The engine behind me idled, headlights cutting into the darkness like item. The car stayed where it was, waiting. I reached for the glove box, retrieving the small notebook I'd found in the gas station bathroom, the one with scribbled notes and strange, half-erased maps. My fingers trembled as I flipped through it. There, scrawled in uneven handwriting, was a phrase that made my blood run cold. No one leaves once you're marked. I closed the book quickly, my breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. I looked up, and the car's headlights dimmed, then vanished down the highway like it was giving me space until the tail lights reappeared far in the distance, steady and relentless. I was trapped. There was no going back. No escape. Rain hammered against the windshield as the night swallowed the empty road in a suffocating silence. Only forward, into whatever this was. And I still had no idea what this. There was a long pause, was. But I knew one thing, I was beyond the point of no return. The night had thickened into something almost solid, pressing against the windows of my car like a living thing. The cold was sharper now, biting through the thin fabric of my jacket. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, where the faint glow of those tail lights lingered, stubborn and unblinking. They were closer than before. Somehow, they had crept up again, keeping that eerie, exact distance like a dark shadow tethered to me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles turning white. The notebook sat on the passenger seat, its worn edges curled, the phrase "no one leaves once you're marked" echoing in my mind louder than any engine. I tried to shake off the creeping dread, telling myself this was all some sick game or coincidence. But the highway stretched out empty before me, and the only certainty was that car behind me. My phone lay dead on the dash, the screen black, useless. GPS had gone dark minutes ago. No signal. Nothing. It was as if the world outside had swallowed me whole. I considered my options, though they felt thinner than the cold air seeping in through the cracked window. Turning around? That was impossible. The rear lights would just follow. Speeding up? I tried that. They matched every acceleration, every braking. Stopping? That didn't seem safer. And yet, I was running out of road and patience. The radio crackled suddenly, static breaking the silence like dry leaves underfoot. I flipped through stations, hoping for a voice, a human sound, anything. Instead, I caught fragments of a local news report about a missing woman, last seen near this stretch of highway. The announcer's voice sounded tired, distant, like they were reading from a script they didn't believe. The words stuck in my throat, but I couldn't put a name to the story. It didn't feel random. I exhaled, fogging the glass again. My breath looked ghostly in the dim cabin light. I could smell the faint scent of pine from the trees lining the road, mixed with the stale tang of spilled coffee from earlier. It was oddly comforting and completely out of place. I glanced back once more. The headlights had dimmed again, then vanished behind a curve. Relief hit me, brief and shallow. Maybe they turned off. Maybe this was finally over. Then the headlights reappeared, closer, sharper, cutting through the mist like an item. The car wasn't gone. It had just been waiting. A cold sweat broke out along my spine. I swallowed hard. The notebook's words weren't just warnings anymore, they were instructions. I didn't know who had written them, or why, but I knew then that I was caught in something far bigger than I wanted to believe. I debated pulling off again, maybe walking to the tiny gas station I passed hours ago. But the thought of stepping outside felt suddenly reckless. The highway was a ribbon of darkness, and that car could be anywhere along it, waiting. I tried to call someone again, anyone, but the dead phone was as unresponsive as the night. No calls, no texts, no help. Then the headlights flickered and blinked, like a strobe light in the distance. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. I blinked, heart speeding. The signals came again, pause, 2 short bursts, pause like Morse code, but I couldn't decipher the pattern. My mind scrambled for sense. Was it a warning? A threat? Or an attempt at communication? I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of panic swirling inside me. There was no way to guess. Only one thing was clear. I wasn't alone out here, and whatever was behind me was willing to play by rules I didn't understand. The temperature dropped again. My fingers were numb on the wheel. The notebook lay open on the seat beside me, the pages rustling softly with the heater's weak blast. I pulled the car over just past an old, cracked mile marker. The engine behind me slowed almost immediately, idling with the patience of a predator. My breath came out in sharp, visible puffs, and I could swear the silence wrapped around me like a thick blanket. I turned off the ignition and sat frozen, listening. The tires of the other car crunched softly on gravel. The night was pin-drop quiet except for that sound. Then, unexpectedly, a voice came over the car's speaker system behind me. Low, calm, almost amused. "Why stop now?" it said. I jerked back, startled. My heart slammed against my ribs. My mind raced, trying to place the voice. Male. Mid-30s, maybe older. It sounded familiar, but distant, like a memory I couldn't quite reach. "Who is this?" I asked, voice barely steady. "Just someone who's been waiting," the voice replied. "You've got questions." "So do I." I swallowed, trying to steady my shaking hands. "What do you want from me?" There was a pause, then a quiet laugh. "You're not the first. You won't be the last. But you're the one who found the notebook. That changes things." I frowned, heart sinking. "I don't understand." "What notebook?" "The one you're holding. The one with the map and the warning. It's a game, you see. Rules written in ink and fear. You're marked, and now you have to play." I felt a cold chill spread down my back. Game? What kind of game? Survival. Control. The kind where you think you're running, but you're really just moving around the board. The car behind you? That's me, or someone like me. We keep the rules. I didn't know if I should laugh or cry. The absurdity of it all crashed into me like a wave. "I'm not playing," I said, voice cracking. "I don't even know what this is." The voice grew softer. "You do now. And there's no turning back." I looked into the rearview mirror again. The headlights weren't just there, they were watching, waiting. I realized then I was alone in the middle of nowhere, with a stranger who knew everything about me, yet revealed nothing. The road stretched on endlessly, but I was trapped in a narrowing circle of fear. I reached for the notebook again, flipping to a page I hadn't seen before. I wish I were making this up. A crude drawing of the highway, with marks and circles penciled in. A note scribbled in the margin read, "Find the end. Or it finds you." My breath caught in my throat. The implication was clear, even if the meaning wasn't. The voice spoke again, cutting through the silence. "You want to end this? You have to face it. Head to the old rest stop at mile 87. Alone." "Why?" I whispered. "Because that's where it all started." The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of ink spilled across the midnight sky, endless and unyielding. The road hummed beneath my tires, a low, steady vibration that settled somewhere deep in my bones. I kept stealing glances in the rearview mirror. The car was still there, always there, its headlights a pair of dull, unblinking eyes glued to my tail. No matter how fast I pushed the accelerator, it didn't falter, didn't waver. Same distance. Same cold, mechanical rhythm. I didn't know how long I'd been driving like this, hours, maybe. Time had folded in on itself, becoming irrelevant. My phone was dead, the screen black and lifeless in my lap. The GPS, my only compass in this vast emptiness, had died along with it, leaving me blind and stranded on a highway that refused to end. I tried to shake the feeling crawling up my spine. Rational thought was a sinking ship, and I was clinging to whatever driftwood I could find. It's probably just someone heading the same way, I muttered aloud, voice rough and dry. The sound of my own words startled me. There was no one else out here, not really. The nearest town was miles behind, swallowed by darkness and silence. A flicker of movement caught my eye, something small and quick darting across the shoulder. A rabbit. Maybe. The smell of damp earth and pine filled the air, sharp and unexpected against the stale scent of the car's upholstery. The engine's steady drone was a thin thread holding me to reality. I tried calling someone once more. No signal. Nothing but dead static. My fingers trembled as I pressed the buttons, the cold plastic unfamiliar and foreign. The only light came from the dashboard, the glowing red numbers of my speedometer climbing steadily as I pushed harder. 90. 95. 100 miles per hour. The headlights behind me didn't blink or fade. They just followed, patient and relentless. I swallowed hard and glanced at the side mirror, catching a glimpse of the driver's face, or rather, the absence of one. The windows were tinted, thick and dark, as if the car itself wanted to swallow whoever or whatever was inside. I blinked, and the reflection shifted, vague and indistinct. Something in my chest tightened. Not fear exactly, but a raw, aching tension. The kind that knots your stomach and leaves your hands clammy. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but the lines blurred, stretched thin like threads threatening to snap. Then it happened. The car behind me swerved suddenly, headlights flickering erratically. A pulse of panic surged through me as I slammed on the brakes, tires skidding on gravel, the world tilting sideways for a breathless moment. The other car did the same, matching my erratic movements with eerie precision. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered into the dark, voice cracking. I could taste the bitterness of adrenaline, sharp and metallic. The rain began, not hard, but enough to blur the edges of the world, droplets tapping in nervous rhythm on the windshield. The wipers fought to keep pace, dragging slow arcs across the glass. I pressed the accelerator again, heart hammering. The car behind mirrored me, just like before. It was a cruel game, and I was the only player who didn't know the rules. Then, out of nowhere, a voice crackled through the dead silence. "Stop the car." I jerked upright. The voice was calm, too calm, smooth as oil sliding over broken glass. It came from nowhere and everywhere, like the road itself was speaking. "Who is this?" I demanded, voice shaking despite myself. No answer. I glanced down at the phone on the passenger seat. Black screen. Dead. The silence returned, thick and suffocating. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly the knuckles whitened. The taillights behind me blinked once, twice, then vanished. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. The air felt lighter, almost warm. Then headlights appeared again, further back this time, like a shadow retreating into the night. I let out a slow breath, muscles loosening just a fraction. The road ahead was empty, the way forward suddenly clear. I didn't slow down. The sun began to bleed into the horizon, pale and hesitant. The night's grip loosened, and with it, the oppressive weight in my chest. I thought about the driver behind me. Who they were. What they wanted. I still didn't know, and maybe I never would. But something about that quiet persistence, the way they held distance, felt less like a threat and more like a warning. Or a test. I pulled off the highway near a small gas station just as the first birds began to sing. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unwelcoming. Inside, the air smelled of cheap coffee and stale pastries. A man behind the counter gave me a tired smile. "You look like you've been on the road all night," he said, voice rough but kind. "Something like that," I replied, voice raw. "Have you seen a black sedan around here? Dark windows?" He shook his head. "Not recently. But this place sees its share of strange folks. You okay?" I nodded, though the truth was tangled up in exhaustion and relief. "Yeah, I think so." Sitting by the window, sipping lukewarm coffee, I let the daylight wash over me. The highway was quiet now, empty except for a few scattered cars. No sign of the black sedan, no mysterious voice, just the steady pulse of ordinary life creeping back in. I realized then how tightly I'd been holding my breath, how long I'd been running, not just from the car, but from everything it represented. The loneliness, the fear, the endless, unanswerable questions. I pulled the collar of my jacket tighter around my neck and stared out the window. The road behind me stretched wide and empty, a ribbon of possibility. I didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in hours, I felt something like hope. Slowly, I reached for my phone and plugged it in. The screen flickered to life, the GPS signal returning with a soft ping. I typed in an address, a real one this time, and watched the blue dot pull steadily toward home. The black sedan was gone. Silence. Complete silence. And I was still here. Story 2. The clock above the counter blinked 11:47 p.m. I'd been working this late shift for 2 weeks now, the lonely hours stretching out like some endless, dark ribbon. The station sat far from any town, wedged between a thin stretch of highway and a cluster of scraggly pine trees that didn't look quite right when the moonlight hit them. The kind of place where time seemed to slow down, or maybe just stop altogether. I liked the quiet, usually. It gave me time to think without interruption, to listen to the low static of the radio and the occasional distant bark of a dog. But there was something about this place, about the way the night settled here, that felt off. Not wrong exactly, but uneasy. Like the silence was watching me, waiting. The other attendants, there were 3 of them, all older guys with 2 quiet voices and 2 still eyes, never spoke much. They'd come and go in shifts, but whenever I saw them, they stood or sat somewhere just within the edge of my vision, watching. No nods, no greetings, just stillness. At first, I thought maybe they were shy or just tired like me. But the way their eyes lingered, unblinking, made the air feel colder. Not physically cold. Just colder. Tonight was no different. I noticed the youngest of them, a man named Harris, standing near the back aisle by the shelves of canned beans. His stance was rigid, his face unreadable, like a statue. I caught him watching me for a second, then quickly looked away. My hands trembled slightly as I restocked the candy bars, the wrappers crinkle sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. "Hey," I said, just to break the quiet, though it felt strange talking to someone who didn't answer. Harris didn't move. I shook my head. Probably nothing. I was tired, maybe imagining things. The bell above the door jingled sharply, a sound that startled me more than it should have. A man stepped inside, his boots clicking on the linoleum floor. He had a nervous energy about him, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting to see someone or something. "Late night, huh?" I offered, forcing a smile. He nodded, eyes darting toward the back of the store. "Yeah, just passing through." I went back to scanning his items, the scanner's beep echoing oddly in the empty space. When I looked up, the attendants were gone. I blinked. They hadn't moved from where they were before, had they? Or had they? Got any bottled water? The customer asked. Right there, I said, pointing toward the fridge. The cold air hit my face as he opened the door, and the smell of plastic and chilled condensation filled the room. I caught a glimpse of the shelves behind him as he grabbed a bottle. Something was missing. One of the rows, the packets of beef jerky, had a gap where several packs should have been. I frowned. I was sure I'd restocked that section yesterday. Hey, I said, voice low. Did you happen to see anyone take those? He shrugged. Nope, just me. I nodded, but couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I watched him leave, the door jingling behind him, and then turned back to the empty store. The silence stretched again, heavier this time, pressing down on my shoulders. I checked the security monitors. Static flickered across the screen, but I caught brief flashes of the back aisle, where the attendants usually loitered. Still. Watching. Except for me. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be watched or left alone. Later, I found the box of gum was lighter than it should have been. I went through the stockroom twice. No sign of anything misplaced or taken. I told myself I must have miscounted. Maybe the supply guy had made a mistake. But the unease stayed with me, a low from inside my chest. By the time my shift ended, the first pale light of dawn was seeping through the grimy windows. I stepped outside, the rough concrete cold beneath my boots, and took a deep breath. The night was over. For now. Still, as I locked the door behind me, I glanced back. The attendants were nowhere in sight, but their silence hung in the air like a shadow. I couldn't tell if it was waiting for me or waiting for something else. And I was the only one they never watched. I pulled my collar up against the chill morning air and started down the cracked pavement, the weight of unseen eyes pressing at my back. The city was waking up slowly, cars sputtering to life, distant shouts and sirens threading through the haze, but something beneath the surface felt off, like the calm before a storm. I kept my pace steady, forcing my thoughts away from the strange quiet that clung to the building behind me. As I rounded the corner, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A figure slipped between the shadows of the alleyway, too quick to catch but deliberate enough to unsettle me. My grip tightened around the strap of my bag. Whoever they weren't supposed to be there. Not at this hour. I debated following, but instinct told me to keep moving. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket, thumb hovering over the screen before I shoved it back in. No signal. Of course. The city had a way of swallowing connections when you needed them most. Ahead, the streetlight buzzed faintly, casting a sickly yellow glow over the cracked pavement. The silence was broken by a distant clang of metal on metal, sharp and sudden. I stopped, heart hammering as I scanned the empty street. Nothing but the wind teasing loose paper along the curb. A low sigh escaped me, mingling with the morning air. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe the attendant silence had gotten under my skin more than I thought. Still, as I stepped into the growing light, the feeling persisted, a quiet knowing that something was coming, something I couldn't yet see. I glanced over my shoulder once more before turning away. The watchers might not see me, but I was beginning to see them. And I wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. The morning hung heavy around me, thick with the residue of last night's unease. I had to know more. I couldn't just stand there, rattled and restless. There had to be a pattern. Something beneath the surface. The day dragged by in a blur of half-hearted errands and awkward small talk at the grocery store. I caught myself glancing at my phone more than usual, hoping for a signal, a message, anything that would break the isolation. Nothing. Not even a sliver of cell service in this forgotten corner of the world. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, The gas station looked exactly the same. The buzzing streetlight flickered above the entrance, casting uneven pools of jaundiced light over the cracked concrete. I pulled the door open, the bell chiming crisply in the silence. Inside, the scent of stale coffee and plastic wrappers hit me like a wave. They were there again. All three attendants, standing like statues behind the counter. Their eyes didn't follow me immediately. Instead, they fixed their gaze somewhere beyond me, as if I were a ghost passing through their world. I caught myself shoving my hands into my pockets, trying to steady the tremor I couldn't quite suppress. This time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I moved slowly through the aisles, watching. The place felt smaller, tighter somehow, as if the walls themselves were pressing in. I noticed the missing items right away: a box of granola bars, a few cans of soda, a pack of gum gone without a trace. Not just misplaced, but erased. I stopped in front of the snack rack, fingering the empty spaces. "Hey," I said, voice low. "Anyone notice anything weird around here?" No response. Just that same eerie stillness. They watched me, but never me. Always beyond, as if I was invisible. I tried again. "Look, I'm just trying to figure this out. Things have been disappearing. Has anyone else seen it?" The tallest attendant blinked once. Slow, deliberate. His lips tightened, but he said nothing. That's when I caught a flicker of movement behind the glass door leading to the storage room. A shadow, quick and sharp. I moved toward the door, heart knocking so loud I was sure they could hear it. "It's locked," I muttered, jiggling the handle. No give. I stepped back, scanning the room, with its faint smell of dust and decay. The glare of the fluorescent lights made sweat bead on my forehead. The air smelled faintly of motor oil and something else, a sour, metallic tang I couldn't place. My skin crawled. I decided to check the security cameras next. The small monitor sat on the counter, flickering between grainy black and white feeds. I pressed the remote, cycling through the views. The parking lot. The front door. The aisles. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance. Then I froze. In the corner of the beverage aisle, just past the frozen foods, a figure slipped behind the shelves. Someone else. Someone who didn't belong. I rewound the footage, watching again. There was no mistaking it. Someone ducked in and out of the frame, careful, deliberate. Not one of the attendants. Not me. My breath caught. Was the silence a warning? Or just a calm before something worse? I looked up. All three attendants were watching the screen now, their expressions unreadable. Not a flicker of surprise or concern. Just that same unsettling stillness. I forced a smile. So, who else is around here after hours? No answer. Only the hum of the lights and the distant rumble of a truck on the highway. Later, I found myself sitting in the break room, the bitter taste of black coffee grounding me. I pulled the logbook from the counter, sparse notes, mostly complaints about faulty pumps and late deliveries. But then I found it, a handwritten note, scrawled in hurried script, tucked between the pages. Inventory down again. Watch the new guy. He doesn't see. My hands trembled. New guy? Was that me? Or someone else? The idea made my stomach twist. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or bolt. I looked up. The faint buzz of the ceiling light flickered, casting long shadows across the cracked linoleum floor. Outside, a dog barked somewhere far off, sharp and lonely. I knew I couldn't trust the quiet anymore. Not the silence. Not the shadows. Not the watchers. and definitely not the things that vanished without a trace. I had to get to the bottom of this. Before I became the next one, no one saw it all. My hands trembled as I reached for the door handle, the cold metal biting into my skin. Every instinct screamed at me to stay, to dig deeper, but the weight of fear pressed down harder than curiosity. I pushed the door open just a crack, peering out into the dim hallway. The walls seemed to lean in, their peeling paint whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. A faint shuffle echoed from the end of the corridor. I froze, breath caught in my throat. Was it a person? Or something else, lurking just beyond the edge of sight? The sound grew louder, a dragging, uneven step that didn't belong to any living thing I knew. I swallowed hard, stepping back inside and closing the door softly behind me. There was no turning back now. The answers were buried somewhere in this place, tangled in silence and shadow. And if I wanted to survive, I had to be the one to unearth them, no matter what I found. The air hung thick, heavy with a silence that felt like it was pressing against my eardrums. I swallowed and wiped my clammy hands on my jeans, the rough fabric scratching against my skin, reminding me I was alive barely. The store behind me felt suddenly smaller, more claustrophobic, like the walls themselves were closing in. I'd spent the last several nights wondering about the attendants, about their silent, unblinking gazes. Tonight, that silence felt like a warning. The kind you don't hear but somehow know is there, right behind your shoulder. I glanced at the clock. 3:17 a.m. The quiet store was bathed in the flickering glow of a malfunctioning fluorescent light above the register. The hum of the old fridge in the corner buzzed unevenly, like it was struggling to keep going. I noticed the stale smell, an odd mix of burnt coffee and something metallic lingering in the air. It made my stomach churn. I forced myself to step away from the door and move back into the main room. The store felt off. Not just because of the missing items, the candy bars, the packets of gum, even the small bottles of water, but because the attendants weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting. I could feel it in the air. My eyes scanned the dim aisles. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance, but the deeper I looked, the more I realized that the shelves looked less like a shop and more like a carefully curated stage set. Boxes lined up too perfectly, labels facing forward with unnatural precision. The kind of order that's meant to hide something else. The attendants, those silent figures, weren't around. That was the first strange thing. They usually lingered near the back office or behind the counter, their stillness like statues carved from stone. But now, the store was empty, save for me. I heard a faint creak behind me, a subtle shift that made my skin prickle. I turned sharply. Nothing. Just the empty checkout lane, the card reader blinking red. I reached out and tapped it, the plastic buttons cold and unwelcoming under my fingers. Then the realization hit me. I was the only one not being watched. Every other attendant, every time I caught their eyes, there was that unsettling stillness, a quiet assessment, like I was some specimen under a microscope. But now, alone, I was free from their gaze. And yet, I felt more exposed than ever. I took a step toward the back hallway, the place where I'd heard the dragging sound. The floorboards creaked beneath my boots, each one louder than the last. The air grew colder as I walked, the temperature dropping enough to make my breath fog even in the stale store air. I reached the door at the end of the hall, the one I'd cracked open earlier, and pushed it fully open this time. The room beyond was a small storage area, cluttered with boxes and cleaning supplies, a single bare bulb swinging slightly above, casting erratic shadows against the peeling plaster walls. The dragging noise had stopped. Silence. Complete silence. I scanned the room, heart hammering. Then I saw it. Something moved, a flicker of fabric near the back corner. I stepped closer, squinting through the dimness. A figure hunched low, almost melded with the shadows. I blinked. The shape shifted, and the unmistakable silhouette of one of the attendants emerged, knees bent, hands busy rifling through a crate labeled store supplies. I cleared my throat. "Hey!" My voice sounded strange, out of place in the quiet room. The attendant froze, then slowly stood upright. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. The attendant's eyes, dark, unreadable, locked onto mine. No words. No gestures. Just that same unblinking stare. I swallowed again, my mouth dry. "What are you doing back here?" The attendant's gaze flicked briefly toward the crate, then back to me. It was almost like a warning, but without words. I stepped forward, heart slamming against my ribs. Things have been disappearing. I want to know why. Still nothing. Just that oppressive silence. Then, unexpectedly, the attendant turned and walked toward the door, the dragging shuffle returning. I followed, curiosity and fear tangled tight in my chest. We emerged back into the main store, and the attendant stopped near the register. Only then did I notice the other attendants had reappeared, standing motionless behind the counters and aisles, their faces blank, their eyes fixed not on me, but on the shadows beyond. I glanced around, confused. "Why aren't you watching me now?" No answer. Just a slow, deliberate nod from the attendant who'd led me here. Then it hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't about watching me. It was about watching something else. Something I hadn't noticed because I was too focused on their silence. The attendants weren't just observers, they were participants in a game I didn't understand. A sudden noise at the front door made me spin around. The buzzer chimed softly as it opened. A man stepped inside, an unfamiliar face, middle-aged, wearing a worn jacket and a tired expression. He glanced around, then his eyes locked on me with a flicker of something unreadable. Suspicion? Recognition? It was hard to tell. The attendants melted back into the shadows, their statuesque silence returning instantly. But the man didn't approach the register. Instead, he moved cautiously toward the aisles, his eyes scanning like he was searching for something. I swallowed hard. "Can I help you?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. He stopped and looked at me, his gaze sharp and calculating. "You're the new attendant, right? The one who doesn't know the rules yet." The words sent a cold rush through me. The rules? What rules? Before I could answer, the man's eyes flicked toward the back hallway, where I'd just been. They don't like it when you ask questions. You're already in deeper than you think. My pulse quickened. I wanted to back away, to run out the door and never look back. But something about the man's presence anchored me in place, a mix of warning and inevitability. "Why?" I managed to whisper. He shook his head slowly. "Because this place isn't just a gas station. It's a trap. For people like you." The fluorescent light above flickered violently, casting the entire store into a strobe of shadow and pale light. The attendants shifted slightly, their silent watch returning with renewed intensity, but still, none of them looked at me. I realized then that I was no longer just an outsider. I was a part of something I hadn't chosen, something that didn't want me to leave. My escape routes were gone. The road behind me was empty, the night pressing close, and the quiet watchers were waiting. I took a shaky breath. The point of no return was here. And whatever came next, there was no turning back. The man's words echoed behind me like a pulse, a warning beating against the walls of that stale gas station air. This place isn't just a gas station. It's a trap. For people like you. I stared at the flickering light, its erratic strobe casting long shadows where the attendants stood, silent, unmoving. None of them looked at me, not once. It was as if I'd become a ghost in their world. I wanted to move, to shake free of this sudden gravity that pulled me deeper into something I didn't understand. But my feet stayed glued to the cracked linoleum floor, the smell of burnt coffee and plastic wrapping thick around me. The man's eyes bored into mine, steady, unyielding. They don't like it when you ask questions. You're already in deeper than you think. The words sunk into me like cold water. I swallowed hard. Why? He shook his head, slow, deliberate. Because they watch. And if they notice you watching back, well, it doesn't end well. I glanced at the attendants again. Their faces were impassive, blank masks. Their eyes were fixed somewhere just beyond me, never landing on my skin. I realized with a sinking certainty that I was the only one they never watched. The silence stretched and pressed against my eardrums until I thought I might crack. I wanted to ask more, but the man stepped back, his presence fading like a shadow retreating into the night. I was alone again, but something had shifted. The store felt colder, smaller. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and forced myself toward the back hallway, the place that had felt off from the start. The cracked door creaked when I nudged it open, revealing a narrow corridor that smelled like damp concrete and forgotten things. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked a sharp, lonely sound that made my skin crawl. I stepped inside, my shoes echoing against the hard floor. The attendant's silence followed me like a shroud, their stillness growing heavier with every step. I tried to keep my breathing steady, but my chest felt tight, as if the air was thickening around me. At the end of the hallway, a door marked storage stood slightly ajar. I pushed it open just enough to peer inside. Rows of shelves lined the room, with its faint smell of dust and decay, but some were empty, gaping holes where inventory should have been. Boxes of snacks, cleaning supplies, even some of the drinks from the refrigerated cases were missing. I pressed my palm against the cool metal shelf, tracing the rough edges of a torn cardboard box. My mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. Things disappearing. The attendants watching me silently. The man's warning. A trap. I heard a soft shuffle behind me and whipped around. One of the attendants stood there, motionless, expression unreadable. His eyes didn't meet mine. They were fixed just past my shoulder. I swallowed hard and forced myself to speak. Why won't you look at me? No response. Just the same unblinking stare. I stepped back, heart hammering. My hands trembled slightly, the rough plaster wall biting into my fingertips. The attendant didn't move, didn't blink. I felt the weight of those unseen eyes again, watching me, but never truly seeing me. I closed the storage room door quietly and leaned against it, sliding down until I was sitting on the cold floor. The fluorescent light flickered above, casting long, jittery shadows that danced across the walls. I could almost believe I was losing my mind. I'm not crazy, I told myself. None of this makes sense. But the pieces don't fit. None of it. The sound of the front door opening snapped me upright. The bell chimed, sharp and unexpected in the stillness. I wiped my sweaty palms on my pants and hurried out of the hallway. Behind the counter stood the man again, the one who had warned me. His eyes met mine briefly, and for a moment, I thought I saw something else there. Not hostility, exactly. More like pity? Or maybe regret. Before I could ask, he held up a finger. Listen carefully, he said, voice low. You're not safe here. Not from them. And not from yourself. What do you mean? I asked, voice barely more than a whisper. He leaned in closer, his breath smelling faintly of stale tobacco and something metallic. They don't just watch. They control. The silence is part of it. You think they're quiet because they're harmless? Because they're just workers or ghosts. They're waiting for you to slip, to break the rules. I swallowed again. What rules? His eyes darted toward the back hallway, the same one I'd just been in. The ones you don't even know you're playing by. Before I could press him for more, the bell rang again. This time, it wasn't the front door. It was the emergency exit. A sharp, piercing sound that cut through the quiet like a scream. The man's posture changed instantly. Alert. Tense. He looked toward the door, then back at me. You need to get out. Now. Why? What's happening? He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed my arm with surprising strength, pulling me toward the front doors. Outside, the night was colder than I remembered, the wind carrying the faint smell of rain and dust. The parking lot was empty except for a single car idling near the gas pumps. Headlights off. Engine humming low. A shadow detached itself from the darkness near the pumps. A figure, tall and slow-moving, without a sound except for the crunch of gravel underfoot. I froze, breath catching in my throat. The man tightened his grip on my arm. They're coming. Who? I gasped. But he was already turning me away from the pumps, guiding me back toward the building's side entrance, the one I hadn't noticed before. The door was unlocked. We slipped inside, the cool air of the storage room swallowing us whole. The man pressed a finger to his lips, then pointed toward a small, dimly lit office beyond the shelves. I followed, heart pounding so loudly I was sure it was going to burst right out of my chest. Inside the office, the man closed the door quietly and locked it. The room smelled of old coffee, dust, and something faintly metallic again, like blood, but I wasn't sure. He turned to me, eyes dark and serious. If they catch you outside, it's over. Who are they? What do they want? He shook his head. It's not about what they want. It's about what they need. And you're part of that. I sank into the chair, hands curled into fists on my lap. The fluorescent bulb overhead flickered once more, then steadied. The silence returned, thick and suffocating. But now it felt different. The night was colder than usual, the kind of cold that seeps through the thin fabric of your shirt and settles into your bones. I could see my breath fogging the cracked glass of the storefront window as I wiped it down, trying to ignore the familiar, almost electric silence that had wrapped itself around the gas station like a second skin. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, their flicker casting shadows that didn't quite line up with the geometry of the shelves. It was the kind of place that should feel empty and hollow, but instead, it pressed against me, heavy and watchful. I glanced over my shoulder. They were there, as always. The attendants silent, still, unblinking. Their faces were unreadable, like statues carved from granite, their eyes fixed somewhere just beyond me. I knew that none of them ever spoke, but tonight, the silence felt different. Thicker, almost purposeful. As if it was no longer just silence but a presence. The biggest problem was that none of them ever looked at me. Not once. They watched everything else, the pumps outside, the door, the aisles, but never me. I used to think it was some odd quirk, a strange way they coped with the long shifts. But after the things started disappearing, first the energy drinks, then the cigarettes, even the cash from the register, it hit me. They weren't watching me because I was the only one they didn't want to see. I hated that feeling. It made every step I took feel like a trespass, every breath a mistake. My hands trembled as I scanned the shelves, the plastic packaging oddly dull under the flickering lights. I'd started locking the back door, but the disturbances kept rising. Boxes shifted, items vanished without explanation, and the attendants remained statues, silent, but increasingly oppressive. I thought about calling someone, anyone. The manager, the police. But what would I say? The silent attendants are stealing from me? That sounded absurd, and besides, the station was miles from anywhere, surrounded by nothing but scrubland and a highway that rarely saw traffic after dark. No one would believe me. I caught movement from the corner of my eye as shadows slipping between shelves. I spun, heart hammering, but the aisle was empty. Only the faint scent of cheap coffee and rubber lingered. I told myself it was my imagination, but the feeling didn't fade. It grew heavier. I decided I had to confront it head on. If I was going to keep working here, I needed answers. Maybe the silence wasn't just silence. Maybe it was a language I hadn't learned yet. I moved toward the break room, the doors chipped paint rough under my fingertips. Inside, the air was stale, tinged with the faint sweetness of spilled soda and stale popcorn from the vending machine. The attendants were there, sitting perfectly still, eyes locked on something outside the grimy window. I stepped forward. "Hey," I said, my voice breaking the quiet like a splash in a still pond. No reaction. "Why aren't you watching me?" I asked, voice shaking. "Why do you keep stealing from the store? And why won't you talk to me?" Still nothing. Their faces remained blank, unreadable. I sank into a chair, the vinyl cracking beneath me. The silence pressed harder, as if waiting for something. I realized I was the one who'd been avoiding looking at myself all this time, afraid of what I might see if I really paid attention. I closed my eyes and breathed in. The cold air smelled like metal and dust. When I opened them, I caught a flicker in one attendant's eyes. A twitch. A blink. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. "Are you afraid?" I whispered, more to myself than to them. The attendants shifted. The silence finally broke, but not with words. A single tear slid down one cheek, catching the dim light like a drop of morning dew. Another followed. Their faces softened, no longer statues but people trapped behind something invisible, a wall of fear, pain, maybe regret. I realized then that the silence wasn't a tool or a threat. It was a shield. I swallowed hard. "I'm scared too," I admitted. "But I'm not going anywhere. Not until I understand." Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I lost track. The attendants didn't speak, but they didn't watch me either. They just sat there, together, silent but present. In that quiet, I felt something shift inside me, a fragile thread of connection that hadn't been there before. Morning light crept over the horizon, pale and hesitant. I stepped outside, the cold air biting at my cheeks, and looked back at the gas station. The building looked tired but alive, like it was holding its breath. I realized I was too. I finished my shift and locked the doors behind me, the key clicking in the cold metal. The attendants watched me go, not with suspicion or hostility, but something like acceptance. I walked away, the gravel crunching underfoot, the sky lightening with each step. The silence wasn't gone, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was just there, like a quiet promise. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe the attendants would start talking. Maybe the disappearances would stop. Maybe I'd learn the story that silence had been hiding all along. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was alone. The road stretched ahead, empty but open, and I kept walking, carrying the night's weight with me, not as a burden, but as a strange kind of understanding. I was part of it now. Not watched. Not hunted. Seen. And that made all the difference. Story 3. I never thought the quiet hum of the city at night could feel so loud. Maybe it was just the way the wind shifted suddenly, a cold draft sneaking around the corner and rattling the loose chain on the fire escape. I pulled my jacket tighter around me. The cold wasn't really that bad, but it made my skin prickle anyway. I glanced down at my watch. Almost midnight. Too late to be out, but not late enough to be worrying about it. I told myself I was tired, just tired. That's when I heard it, the sound of a steel door sliding open somewhere nearby. Not the usual creak or slam you'd expect from an old building settling, but a smooth, deliberate slide. It was faint, like a whisper carried on the wind, but unmistakable. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. Maybe a truck gate down the block, or some kind of delivery door left ajar. I listened harder. Then I heard it again, a soft, metallic scrape, followed by a muted clunk. The elevator dinged open, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the 5th floor. The car smelled faintly of machine oil and stale air, the kind of smell that sticks to your clothes without you realizing it. I leaned against the wall, watching the numbers glow one by one. 5. I stepped out onto the dimly lit hallway, the walls painted a tired shade of beige scuffed by years of careless hands and passing shoes. The carpeting muffled my footsteps, but in the silence, every soft shuffle felt like thunder. I headed toward my apartment, frowning as I passed the door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, which was odd. I was certain I'd closed it this morning. I wanted to call out, to check if someone was inside, but the silence pressed down on me, making my throat tight. Instead, I pushed the door gently with my shoulder. It swung open to reveal an empty hallway stretching beyond, but not the hallway I knew. The walls were the same dull beige, but the layout was wrong. The hallway narrowed sharply, and the ceiling seemed lower. The familiar exit signs blinked erratically, casting sickly green glows that made the shadows dance. My heart ticked up, not out of fear exactly, but a sudden, inexplicable unease. I stepped in, the door sliding shut behind me without a sound. I spun around. No handle, no latch, just smooth metal. I tried the door, pushing and pulling, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. For a brief second, I laughed nervously, telling myself I must have wandered into a maintenance corridor or a service stairwell I'd never noticed. The building was old. Strange things happened. Then I heard it again. That sliding sound, the heavy steel door moving somewhere behind me. Closer this time. I turned sharply, eyes searching the dimness. The hallway shifted, or maybe it was my mind. The wall seemed to curve, the floor tilting slightly underfoot. I swallowed hard. The smell was different here, damp plaster mixed with something acidic, like cleaning chemicals left too long. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and strange. No answer. Only the sliding door again, faint but definite, somewhere I couldn't see. I backed up, bumping into a wall. My hand slid along the cold plaster, rough and grainy. The floor was cold under my shoes. I could taste the metallic tang in the air, like rust or blood. I blinked, trying to clear the sudden dizziness. Maybe it was dehydration. Or exhaustion. Okay, I said to myself, voice steadier than I felt. Just a weird layout. I'll find the stairs. But as I moved forward, the hallway behind me shifted again. The door I'd come through was gone, replaced by a solid wall. My stomach clenched. The sliding noise came again. Close now, almost behind me. I spun around. Nothing visible. Then, a faint click echoed somewhere in the distance, like a lock snapping shut. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. The building settled around me, but it wasn't the same building I'd entered. The air was heavier, colder. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears, loud and uneven. I tried to call someone, anyone, but my phone was dead. Battery drained to 0. I had no charger with me. I cursed my own carelessness. How did I not notice? The silence swallowed me whole. I walked forward again, forcing my feet over the cold floor, each step echoing in the narrow corridor. The walls closed in, the light flickered. Then, the door slid open to my right. Another cell, or room, or whatever this place was. The door moved without a sound, but the darkness inside swallowed the faint light. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to run back down the corridor, back to my apartment, back to anything familiar. But something else, a strange pull, made me step inside. The air was thick and stale, the faint smell of mildew and something else I couldn't place. My skin crawled. The door slid shut behind me. Silence. Complete silence. I was alone. Or so I thought. Hello? My voice cracked slightly. No answer. In the corner, I saw a thin layer of dust disturbed, like something had brushed against it recently. I knelt down, fingertips grazing the floor. It was cold, colder than the rest of the room, with its faint smell of dust and decay. The hairs on my neck stood up. I wanted to believe this was a trick, a maze of hallways and doors that shifted like a faulty building. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. The building was alive in some way, moving, rearranging itself. And I was trapped inside it. I sat down on the cold floor, pulling my knees to my chest. The silence pressed close, heavy and suffocating. I closed my eyes, trying to remember the last time I felt truly safe. The last time the world made sense. A faint scraping sound echoed again. The steel door in front of me slid open silently. I looked up. It was another corridor. The walls were different this time, white, sterile, like a hospital. The smell was sharper, cleaner, but no less empty. I stood, my legs shaking. I didn't know where I was anymore or how I'd gotten here. All I knew was that the doors kept moving, the space kept changing, and I was running out of places to hide. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. I didn't want to admit it, but a small, nagging voice inside me whispered that this was only the beginning. The sterile corridor stretched ahead like a wound, sharp and raw against my skin. I shook my head, trying to clear it, but the taste of copper lingered on my tongue. I'd been here how long? Days? Hours? Time blurred in this shifting prison. I tried to count, but the numbers slipped away like shadows. I pressed my palm against the wall, rough plaster beneath my fingers, cold and unforgiving. It grounded me somehow, a reminder that this place was real in some way, even if it defied reason. The door behind me slid shut with a soft sigh. I didn't look back. There was no point. The passage ahead curled left, then right, folding in on itself like a maze designed to trap the mind. I took a deep breath and started walking. I needed a plan. I needed evidence. I needed something solid. I'd been wondering, yes, but maybe if I mapped the place, if I kept track of every door and turn, I could find a pattern. Maybe then I could outsmart this hellish architecture. Or at least understand it. I pulled a small notebook from my pocket. It was damp and wrinkled but still legible. I pressed the tip of a stubby pencil against the page and began to sketch the corridor behind me, a straight line, a sharp left, a right bend. I marked the open doorways, the sliding steel slabs. I wrote down the smell, the feel of the walls, the flicker of the lights. Details mattered. They had to. A faint sound caught my attention, a low murmur, like voices just beyond hearing. My head snapped toward the source, heart thudding so hard I thought it might burst free. Nothing. just the hum of the lights and the distant scrape of metal. Maybe I was imagining things. Or maybe someone else was here. I hesitated. The last time I'd heard voices, it had been a distant argument, muffled and frantic. I tried calling out, but my voice had sounded small, swallowed by the walls. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. This time, I whispered, "Hello?" The sound felt fragile, lost in the cavernous hall. No answer. I kept moving, pencil scratching softly against paper, tracing my path. The corridor narrowed, walls closing in, the air growing colder. I rubbed my arms, the chill sinking into my bones. My breath came out in small clouds, misting in the stale air. I wondered if the temperature change was real or just my mind playing tricks again. I stopped at a junction where 3 doors waited like sentries. Each was heavy steel, cold to the touch, sliding open just enough to invite or warn. The first door was marked with peeling numbers, 13. The second had a faded symbol I couldn't place. The third was unmarked, its surface pitted and scarred. I hesitated. Which way to go? The rational part of me screamed to choose the door with the least resistance, the one that seemed less threatening. But I knew better. The prison was a puzzle, and answers rarely came easy. I picked the unmarked door, sliding it open silently. Inside was a room with cracked tiles, a single metal bench bolted to the floor, and a small barred window high on the wall. The light from the window flickered, casting long, jittery shadows. The air smelled damp and sour, like mildew mixed with something sweeter, decay, maybe. I ran my fingers along the bench's edge, feeling the rough, cold steel bite into my skin. Suddenly, a soft click echoed behind me. The door slid shut. Silence fell like a weight. I turned sharply, heart hammering. The lock engaged with a faint metallic thud. No one was there. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. Faint footsteps echoed somewhere beyond, slow and deliberate. I called out again, voice steadier this time. "Is anyone there?" Only silence answered. My hands trembled. I sat on the bench, knees drawn up, chin resting on my arms. I pulled my knees tighter as if to protect myself from the invisible menace lurking just out of sight. This place was playing with me. I tried to focus on the notebook, on the lines and notes I'd made. The map wasn't complete, but it was something, a thread to follow out of the labyrinth. I traced my finger over the pencil marks, trying to will the pattern into existence. That's when I noticed it, letters scratched into the wall, faint, almost invisible. I leaned closer, squinting. The words were scrawled in uneven handwriting, like someone desperate to leave a message. "Trust no one. They watch." A shiver ran down my spine. Someone else had been here. Or was still here. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, but the screen remained black. Dead. I'd forgotten to charge it. The charger was gone, vanished like everything else. No signal. No way out. The silence pressed again, deeper this time, as if the walls themselves inhaled and held me prisoner. Then, a voice. Clear, calm, but distant. "Why are you here?" I jumped up, heart in my throat. The voice came from the speaker embedded in the ceiling, a tiny grill I hadn't noticed before. I looked up, but there was no face, no sign of a person. "Who's there?" I demanded, voice cracking. "No one you know," the voice replied. "But we've been waiting." "Waiting for what?" I asked, swallowing hard. "To see if you break." I sat back down, stunned. The words echoed in the room, with its faint smell of dust and decay, bouncing off the walls, filling every corner. I tasted bile at the back of my throat, bitter and sour. I thought about the door that had just locked, about the shifting halls and the endless silence, about the scratching on the walls and the ghost of footsteps. Why me? I whispered. Because you're alone. Because you think you're safe. The lights flickered, plunging the room into near darkness before sputtering back to life. I blinked, trying to focus. A faint, metallic scent filled the air, sharper now. Like something had been hidden here: rust, sweat, old fear. I pulled my knees tighter, the bench cold beneath me, and realized I wasn't just trapped in a building. I was trapped inside my own unraveling mind. The voice came again, softer this time. Time to decide. The door slid open. I didn't know if I wanted to step through, but I had no choice. I stood, heart pounding so hard I thought it might shatter my ribs. The corridor beyond was darker now, shadows pooling along the floor. The walls closed in a little more, the air thickening. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. Behind me, the door slid shut. Silence. Complete silence. Then, footsteps. Not mine. The footsteps stopped. I swallowed hard and forced my legs to move. One step. Then another. Each footfall echoed, a hollow reminder that I was utterly alone, or so I told myself. The silence pressing from all sides made my ears ring. I couldn't even hear my own breath clearly anymore. The corridor stretched longer than I remembered, narrowing as I went. The walls, rough and pitted with flakes of peeling paint, seemed to close in, inching closer with every step. The air grew heavier, thick enough to taste, sour and stale as if trapped in a sealed vault for decades. My shirt stuck to my skin. I wiped my damp palms on my jeans, but the uneasy clamminess only returned. Time to decide, the voice whispered again, this time from somewhere behind me, but not close enough to pinpoint. It wasn't an echo, it was deliberate, a taunt wrapped in calm menace. I stopped. Turned slowly. Nothing but shadows and the dull hum of the flickering light. My throat was dry, rough as sandpaper. I forced out a shaky, "Who's there?" No reply. Just silence. But the weight of being watched pressed down on me like a physical force, making my chest tight and my hands tremble. I rubbed my arms hard, trying to will away the chill crawling of my spine. The last door had slid shut behind me, sealing off any hope of retreat. That much was clear. No turning back now. Whatever this place was, whatever it wanted, it had me exactly where it wanted me, deep inside the maze, both outside and inside my mind. I pressed forward, drawn by some stubborn thread of survival, though every step felt like sinking deeper into quicksand. The corridor suddenly bent sharply to the left, the wall shifting as if I'd stumbled into a different room altogether. The sound of the steel door sliding open was softer this time, less mechanical and more deliberate. As if the building itself was breathing, rearranging itself to trap me further. Ahead, the dim light revealed a new cell. The concrete walls were stained in dark streaks of water, rust, or something else I didn't want to know. The floor was littered with crumpled scraps of paper, edges curled and yellowed. I bent down, fingers brushing the brittle sheets. They weren't blank. The writing was hastily scrawled, words overlapping in frantic loops. Don't trust the doors. They listen. They decide. Voices aren't real, but they're not lies. Escape is a dream. The maze is your mind. My fingers trembled as I read and reread the notes. This wasn't random. Someone else had been here. Someone who had been trying to make sense of it all, or maybe trying to warn me. But how? And why had they stopped writing? I pocketed the last scrap, the ink smudged but still legible, and looked up. The corridor behind me was gone. The walls had shifted again. The maze was no longer a simple hallway. It was a labyrinth with no exits, a puzzle designed to trap me in more than just this building. A dry cough echoed from somewhere ahead. My heart slammed against my ribs as I spun toward the sound that seemed to vibrate in my bones. Another door, cracked open just a sliver, revealed a dim figure crouched in the corner of the next cell. Their face was hidden beneath shadows, but the ragged breathing was unmistakable human. Alive. "Hey," I called softly, stepping closer. "Are you okay?" The figure flinched but didn't move. Then, a voice cracked through the silence, hoarse and strained. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe." "Neither am I," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "What is this place? Why are we trapped?" The figure shifted, revealing a pale face streaked with dirt and dried sweat. Their eyes were wide, haunted, darting nervously. "It's not just a building. It's a game. Or a test. Maybe a punishment. I don't know anymore." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Have you found a way out?" They shook their head. "No. The doors, they don't just open. They choose. They guide you, but they don't want you to leave." I frowned. "You said it's a test. What kind of test?" The person's gaze dropped to their hands. "Your mind. They break you down until you're nothing but fear and doubt. Reality twists until you can't tell what's real and what's not." I looked around, suddenly dizzy. The walls seemed to pulse, the shadows stretching and shrinking like breathing things. The flickering light overhead threatened to go out again. My throat tightened, dry and raw. I thought I was losing my mind before. But maybe this place is just showing me what's always been inside. The figure nodded slowly. "No one escapes. Not really. You get used to it or you don't last long." I wanted to ask where they came from, how long they'd been trapped, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I looked down at the scraps of paper in my pocket. "Did you write these?" A bitter laugh escaped them. "No. But I found them. Someone else. Someone who didn't make it." The truth crashed over me like cold water. I wasn't just trapped in a building. I was trapped in a cycle, a slow, grinding machine that eroded everything I thought I was. The walls weren't just walls, but mirrors reflecting back my worst fears and memories twisted into nightmares. I glanced at the steel door behind me. It was sealed tight. No hope there. Ahead, the corridor forked into two paths, both swallowed in darkness. The figure looked at me, eyes sharp for the first time. "You have to choose. But once you step forward, there's no going back." My pulse thundered. I knew they were right. This was the point of no return. Whatever lay beyond those shadows would change everything. My hands clenched into fists. I swallowed the bitter taste rising in my mouth, a mixture of fear and something else, determination, maybe. Or stubbornness. "Let's go," I said. Together, we stepped into the darkness. The doors slid shut behind us. The footsteps began again. Not mine. And this time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to follow or run. The darkness swallowed us whole, thick and suffocating, like ink spilled across the corridor. I swallowed hard, the bitter taste of fear mixing with something else, something raw and exposed. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence, but my voice felt trapped behind a wall of dust and rust. The corridor forked again, but this time the choice wasn't left or right. The path ahead had changed. Walls I remembered were gone, replaced by new cells, their heavy steel doors gleaming coldly in the dim light that flickered overhead. The sound of the lights buzzing was constant, a high-pitched whine that grated against my nerves. I reached out, brushing my fingers along the rough, chipped plaster of the wall. It was damp, sticky with condensation. The smell hit me then, stale sweat mixed with something metallic, like old blood or rusting iron. I stopped. The footsteps paused, too. Silence. Complete silence. Do you hear that? I whispered, eyes darting to the shadows where the figure stood motionless. No, they said, but their voice was quiet, uncertain. I shook my head. It's nothing. Or maybe it's everything. My voice cracked. I don't know anymore. We moved forward, the floor cold beneath my worn shoes. The air grew heavier, thick with a kind of pressure I couldn't place. My hands trembled, not from cold but from something deeper, panic, uncertainty, the slow unraveling of whatever thread held me together. A door slid open ahead, the steel scraping silently. I froze. The figure glanced at me, eyes sharp and unblinking. You first, they said. I stepped inside. The cell was smaller than I expected, claustrophobic. A single dim light bulb hummed weakly above, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist. The walls were stained, marked with scratches and smudges, evidence of others who had been here before me. I could almost see the ghosts of their desperation etched in the grime. The door slid shut behind me, and the muffled sound of footsteps resumed outside again, not mine. I pressed my back against the cold wall, heart hammering loud enough to drown out the hum of the light. I tried to steady my breathing. Focus. The walls weren't just walls anymore. They were mirrors, reflecting back everything I was desperate to forget. Memories I shoved deep down clawed their way to the surface. I remembered the night I got lost in the city, the rain pelting my face, streets twisting and turning until I couldn't tell up from down. The panic that crushed my chest. The feeling of being invisible, swallowed by a crowd that never saw me. The cell felt like that night, but worse. No rain. No city. Just darkness and silence and those footsteps. I closed my eyes. Tried to find something solid inside me, something real. But the darkness inside this prison was different. It wasn't just absence of light. It was presence, the presence of every doubt, every fear, every failure I tried to bury. Suddenly, a voice whispered from the corner, so close I thought I'd imagined it. You're not alone. I spun around, heart in my throat. Nothing. Just shadows. My own breath ragged in my ears. Who's there? I demanded, voice trembling. Silence. Then the footsteps again. Closer. Slower. They weren't pacing anymore, but circling, patrolling. Hunting. I pressed my hands over my ears. Tried to block the sound, the rising tide of panic. Focus, I told myself. This is just a mind game. But my mind was already betraying me. Faces flashed behind my eyelids, people I'd known, people I'd lost. Their eyes accusing, their voices sharp in memory. I stumbled backward, knees hitting the cold concrete floor. The figure's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. You have to stop this. I looked up, but they were gone. Gone? No. I must be imagining it. Or maybe I'm losing track of time. The cell had shifted again, walls moved, doors realigned. I was trapped in a maze, and the walls weren't just stone and metal but shifting memories and fears. My hands searched blindly until they found the door handle. Cold steel. Tried to turn it. Locked. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping. Not footsteps. Something else. I held my breath. The tapping grew louder, closer, then stopped abruptly. A voice, clear and cold, spoke from the other side of the door. "Why do you run?" I swallowed. "I'm not running." "Then why are you here?" I hesitated. How do you answer a question like that when you don't even know? "I'm trying to find a way out." "Out?" The voice laughed, low and bitter. "There is no out. Only deeper." The door slid open just a crack. A sliver of light spilled into the cell, and I caught a glimpse of a face, harsh, lined, eyes full of something I couldn't name. Fear. Sadness. Or something worse. I stumbled back, heart pounding, desperate to put distance between us. "Don't be afraid," the voice said softly, almost kindly. But I was afraid. Terrified. I turned and ran, blindly, into the shifting maze. The walls closed in, the shadows lengthened. The footsteps multiplied, mine, theirs, some other impossible rhythm. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to move, had to keep moving, or the darkness would swallow me whole. And then I heard it, the sound of my own voice, echoing back to me from the darkness ahead. "Help me." But who was I really calling out to? The figure? The stranger? Or the fractured pieces of myself scattered across this endless prison? The doors slid shut behind me, cold and final. I was alone. Or maybe not. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a whisper, so faint I wasn't sure if I heard it or imagined it. "Welcome back." The steel door slid open again, not with its usual scrape or metallic groan, but a muted, almost polite sigh. I stared at the dark corridor beyond, swallowing a dry gulp that caught in my throat like gravel. For the first time, I hesitated. The way ahead was no longer a puzzle to solve or a maze to navigate. It was a question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. I stood up, my joints stiff and protesting after hours, or was it days, of sitting on the cold concrete floor. The air smelled different here. Not the stale, damp chill of the earlier cells, but something sharper, like ozone or the faintest trace of bleach. Strange for a place that had no windows, no vents. I ran my fingers along the wall, rough plaster crumbling beneath my fingertips, and it left a faint powdery residue on my skin. The corridor stretched out like a black ribbon, lit only by a flickering fluorescent light overhead. Its intermittent buzzing gave the space a nervous energy, a heartbeat. I took a step forward. Then another. The silence around me was deeper than before. The absence of the usual creaks and groans made my ears ring. I'd stopped counting the number of cells I'd passed through. Each one rearranged itself in a pattern I couldn't decipher, doors sliding open and closed silently, shifting the path deeper into the labyrinth. But this time, the layout felt different. Less arbitrary. More deliberate. Like the place was guiding me somewhere I couldn't escape. My hands trembled slightly as I pressed my back against the cold wall, the chill seeping through my thin shirt. The sensation grounded me, reminding me that I was still here, still alive. I closed my eyes for a moment and tried to breathe evenly. In. Out. In. Out. The rhythm steadied, but the unease remained. Then I heard it. A faint tapping. Not the echo of my footsteps. Something else. Somewhere ahead. Slow, deliberate. Like someone was knocking on metal, light, cautious. "Hello?" My voice cracked, brittle in the hollow space. No answer. The tapping stopped. Silence. Complete silence. I swallowed hard and pushed forward, each step measured, cautious. The corridor ended in a wider chamber, dimly illuminated by the same flickering light. And there, sitting on the cold floor in the far corner, was a figure. I froze. It was a man. His clothes were ragged, stained with dirt and sweat. The skin on his face was pale, splotched with red blotches, and his eyes, God, those eyes were wide open, reflecting the light like glass marbles. He didn't move. Just sat there, tapping his fingers rhythmically on the floor. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice softer this time. "Closer." He didn't speak. "I'm not going to hurt you." The words felt hollow, even to me. The man blinked slowly. Then, with a suddenness that made my heart skip, he looked up and met my gaze. His eyes were empty, and yet filled with something desperate. "You're lost," he whispered. His voice was raw, cracked like dry earth. "I am," I admitted. "Are you?" He nodded once, sharply. "They do this. The ones who built this place. They want us to unravel. To break." I swallowed again. The words echoed everything I'd been feeling, the shifting cells, the silent doors, the endless, empty corridors. But why? What do they gain? He shrugged, a slow, defeated movement. Control. Power. Fear. They watch us tear ourselves apart because it's cleaner than violence. Cleaner than blood. The room felt colder suddenly. I hugged my arms around my chest. "Have you found a way out?" The man's eyes darted to the door behind me, then back to the floor. "No. But I've learned to listen. To wait." "Listen to what?" He tapped the floor again, slower this time, deliberate. The silence between sounds. The spaces where nothing happens. That's where the truth hides. I frowned, unsure if he was mad or just broken. But I was tired of madness. Maybe this was the answer. Maybe waiting and listening was all that was left. We sat there together, two lost souls in a place designed to erase us. I tried to focus on the tapping, on the rhythm. It became a strange kind of comfort, a beat to hold on to when everything else was slipping away. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning here. Then, without warning, the heavy door at the far end of the chamber slid open quietly. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. The man nodded, rising slowly to his feet. This might be it. Or another trick. I didn't trust it, but I didn't have a choice. We stepped toward the opening together. The corridor beyond was brighter. Natural light. A cool breeze that smelled faintly of rain and earth. Hope? Relief? I wasn't sure what to call it. My legs felt weak as I moved forward, following the man's lead. As we walked, the walls stopped shifting. The door stayed open, silent and still. The oppressive weight of the prison seemed to lift with every step. When we finally reached a metal gate, rusted and heavy, the man pushed against it. It creaked open, revealing a small courtyard bathed in pale morning light. Grass. Real grass. The scent of damp soil filled my nostrils, sharp and alive. I breathed in deeply, the air tasting like freedom and something I hadn't felt in a long time, possibility. The man looked at me, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at his lips. We made it. I wanted to believe him. To believe that this nightmare was over. But as I stepped into the courtyard, I realized something important. The prison hadn't just been a place. It had been inside me all along, the shifting cells, the silent doors, the unraveling mind. And walking out didn't erase the scars. I turned back to look at the gate, the endless maze of concrete and steel behind it now quiet. The man was right. We had survived. But survival wasn't a reset button. It was a beginning. A chance to rebuild. I felt the sun on my skin, gentle and warm. The distant sound of birds, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The world was still out there, waiting. And I was still here. I would carry the memory of the prison with me, but I wouldn't let it define me. Not anymore. The man beside me started walking toward the far edge of the courtyard. I followed, step by tentative step. Together, we moved toward the uncertain light. The past was behind us. The future lay ahead. And I was ready to face it. Story 4. I bought the caravan on a damp Tuesday morning, though it might have been a Thursday. I never cared much for caravans, honestly. The smell of stale upholstery, the cramped spaces, the faint chill that seems to seep through the thin walls. But this one had a strange pull, something hot in the way the metal curved and the windows angled. The owner, a wiry man with a patchy beard and a slow, deliberate voice, told me it had been around since the 60s, maybe longer. People say it's got a mind of its own, he said, grinning like he was sharing a private joke. Shifts around, bends the place. Not many take it seriously, but I've heard stories. I laughed it off then. Who wouldn't? But I handed over the cash anyway, mostly on a whim or maybe boredom. I guess deep down I wanted a change, something to shake the monotony of my days spent writing reports in a cramped office, the hum of fluorescent lights above, paper piles growing like tiny paper mountains around me. That night, I parked the caravan at the edge of my back garden. The rain had just stopped, leaving the grass slick and glistening under a waning moon. I sat inside with the door open, the cool air creeping in, smelling of wet earth and wood smoke from nearby chimneys. The interior smelled of dust, damp fabric, a faint hint of mothballs. There was a small kitchenette, a fold-out table, and a narrow bed crammed into the corner. Nothing fancy, but it felt oddly comforting, like a small fortress against the outside world. I'd barely been inside 20 minutes when I noticed something strange. The layout didn't feel quite right. The table was where I'd expected, but the cupboard I thought should be beside it was gone. Instead, there was a narrow passage that led nowhere, or at least, nowhere I'd seen before. I shook my head, blaming the dim light and my tired brain. Maybe the caravan was just cramped and quirky. I lay down on the bed, listening to the soft creaking of the old frame settling, the distant hoot of an owl, and the occasional drip from the gutter outside. The air was cooler inside than outside, which felt unusual. My fingers brushed the rough fabric of the blanket, and I noticed a faint scratch on the wall near the headboard, almost like a tally mark, but jagged and uneven. I closed my eyes and tried to focus on the steady rhythm of my breathing. The caravan felt smaller somehow, tighter, as if the walls were inching closer. I told myself it was the lack of fresh air, that I was imagining things after a long day. Then the door creaked. I sat up so fast I nearly hit my head on the low ceiling. The door was only slightly ajar, a sliver of shadow slipping through the gap. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one was supposed to be here. Outside, the garden lay silent except for the rustling of leaves and a distant dog barking twice, sharply. I stood, the wooden floor cold beneath my feet, and reached out to close the door. It swung open wider, as though pushed by some unseen hand or maybe the wind. But the night was still. Not a breath stirred. I caught my reflection in the window, pale face, tired eyes, the faintest crease of worry at the corner of my mouth. I whispered, "Who's there?" but only my voice answered back, hollow and uncertain. The next morning, the caravan looked different. Not in a glaring way, but subtle. The fridge was on the opposite side, the small sink nearer the bed. I must have misremembered, I told myself. It was probably the angle, the light playing tricks. I spent the day trying to ignore the niggling feeling in the back of my mind. At the office, I caught myself staring out the window, watching a crow hop along the fence like it knew something. My hands trembled slightly as I sipped my lukewarm coffee. The photocopier jammed again, and the stifling buzz of the overhead lights grated on my nerves. That evening, I returned to the caravan. The air smelled different now, less damp, but with a faint metallic tang that made my throat tighten. The narrow corridor that had seemed to lead nowhere the night before now stretched longer, the walls covered in yellowed wallpaper patterned with tiny, faded flowers. I stepped inside and the floorboards creaked beneath me. The table was folded down, but the chair was missing. In its place was a small wooden stool, wobbling on 3 legs. I turned to leave and caught sight of a photograph on the wall, a black and white family portrait, the faces blurred as if smudged by time or perhaps something else. The eyes of the people in the photo seemed to follow me, their expressions frozen between sadness and something harder to read. I felt a chill run down my spine. I reached out to touch the frame, but just as my fingers brushed the glass, I heard a whisper, soft, barely audible, like someone exhaling a single word behind me. I spun around. Nothing. The caravan was empty. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. I tried to laugh it off again, but it tasted bitter in my mouth. The door slammed shut behind me, making me jump. I fumbled with the latch, heart hammering, until it finally gave way and I spilled out into the fading light of dusk. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees and carrying the faint scent of smoke. I looked back at the caravan. It sat there, quiet and still, but somehow different, like it was waiting. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the interior shifted in my mind, the layout changing, walls breathing, shadows twisting just beyond sight. I told myself it was just exhaustion, or maybe a trick of memory. But deep down, I sensed that the caravan held something else. Something waiting to be discovered. Something that might not be entirely kind. I wasn't sure what I'd gotten myself into. But I knew one thing for certain, this was only the beginning. The morning light was weak, almost apologetic, slipping through the thin curtains of the caravan like it didn't want to disturb the quiet chaos inside my head. I rubbed my eyes and blinked harder. The little kitchenette, which I was sure had been tucked neatly against the left wall the night before, now jutted awkwardly at an odd angle, its chipped paint catching the dull light in strange, jagged patterns. A cupboard door gaped open, revealing a jumble of dusty tins and a cracked mug that hadn't been there before. I was certain of it. Every corner of this place seemed to shift when I wasn't looking, like a puzzle with pieces that refused to stay put. The lingering tension from last night settled on my shoulders again, heavier now, the air thick with the faint, sour smell of stale coffee and something metallic, maybe old rainwater pooling somewhere unseen. I pressed my fingers against the wall, feeling the rough plaster beneath the thin wallpaper. It was warm, almost sticky, and I recoiled as if it might burn me. I needed to understand what was happening. I needed to prove I wasn't losing my mind. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the occasional bark of a distant dog and the faint hum of a car passing far down the road. The world beyond the caravan felt normal, almost cruelly so, like a reminder that the strangeness was confined to this tiny, claustrophobic box. I pulled on my jacket, the fabric stiff and cold against my skin, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, tinged with the earthy scent of damp leaves and pine. I looked back at the caravan, its faded yellow paint peeling in patches, windows clouded with grime. It sat there, silent and unyielding, like a sentinel guarding secrets I was desperate to uncover. My first move was to take notes, to map out the layout as it was now, in this moment, before it shifted again. I scribbled in my notebook by the picnic table, the pages fluttering in the breeze. The caravan was roughly 15 feet long, with a door near the center, a small living space at the front, the kitchenette behind that, and a tiny bathroom at the rear. But even as I wrote, I questioned my own observations. Was the bathroom really at the back? Or had it been on the side yesterday? The memory was slippery. I decided to mark every feature, every crack in the walls, every stain on the linoleum floor. If the space was changing, maybe patterns would emerge. Maybe I could predict the shifts. Back inside, I moved cautiously, testing the boundaries of each room. The floor creaked underfoot, a low groan that felt too loud in the tight space. I ran my hand along the counter, tracing the faded floral print, then opened the fridge. It was empty except for a half-empty bottle of water and a forgotten carton of expired milk that reeked of sour decay. I gagged, slammed the door shut, and leaned against the wall, breathing deeply through my nose. The cold sweat on my forehead made me shiver despite the mild temperature. Then I heard it, a faint tapping sound, rhythmic and deliberate. I froze, listening. It came from behind the far wall, the thin barrier between the kitchenette and the bathroom. Tap, tap, tap. I pressed my ear to the wall, heart quickening. The sound stopped. Then came a whisper of movement, soft scuffing, like someone shifting their weight or dragging their foot. I stepped back, eyes darting around the cramped space. The idea that someone might be hiding inside the caravan didn't seem far-fetched anymore. After all, I wasn't the first to own this place. The old landlord had warned me about the rumors, the strange disappearances, the odd behavior of the previous tenants. I hadn't believed any of it until now. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone, fingers fumbling to unlock it. No signal. Of course. The caravan sat in a pocket of dead reception, a fact I'd learned during my first night. I needed a plan. I couldn't just sit here waiting for whatever was behind the wall to make itself known. I paced the length of the caravan, trying to keep my breathing steady, trying to shake off the creeping dread curling in my stomach like a slow poison. Memories flickered unbidden, snatches of conversations I'd overheard at the local pub before buying the caravan, stories about a man who'd once lived here, a recluse with a penchant for paranoia. People said he vanished without a trace, but sometimes, late at night, you could hear him pacing inside, or see lights flickering through the grimy windows. I shook my head. Ghost stories. I wasn't into that nonsense. But why did it feel like those stories were bleeding into my reality? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. If there was someone hiding here, or something else, I needed to find evidence. I checked every cupboard, every nook and cranny. In the bathroom, I found a loose panel under the sink. My fingers dug at the edges, and with effort, it gave way, revealing a narrow crawl space behind the wall. The tapping had definitely come from here. I hesitated. The crawl space was dark, cramped, smelling of mold and rust. I didn't want to crawl inside, but I had to know. I grabbed a flashlight from my bag and shone it into the crawl space. The beam caught on something, a folded piece of paper wedged between the pipes. I reached in and pulled it out, unfolding it carefully. It was a note, written in hurried, uneven scrawl. They watch. The walls move. Don't trust the doorways. Find the truth before it's too late. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just a prank or paranoia. Someone had been trapped here, or at least believed they were. I sat back on my heels, the note trembling in my hands. My mind raced who, when, and why. Then I heard it again. Not tapping this time, but a soft, deliberate creak. The caravan door, slowly opening. I froze, heart pounding, every sense screaming at me. The door opened wider, revealing a shadowed figure standing just outside, face obscured by the dim light. "Hello?" I called, voice cracking. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it took a step forward, then another, crossing the threshold. My breath caught. Was this a neighbor? A stranger? Someone else caught in the same nightmare? Before I could react, the caravan shifted again. The wall seemed to pulse, the air thickening with a strange pressure. The shadow moved, but when I blinked, it was gone. I was alone again. Or so I hoped. Silence. Complete silence. I pressed my back against the wall, clutching the note like a lifeline. The caravan's layout had changed once more. The door I'd just seen open now stood sealed, no handle, no hinges. I swallowed hard. The game had begun. The door wasn't there anymore. Not just sealed shut, but completely vanished as if it had never existed. I pressed my palm against the cold, varnished where the door frame should have been. Smooth. Continuous. Unbroken. That same shaky breath I tried to choke down caught in my throat again. The caravan was no longer a place I could leave. The walls had swallowed the exit whole. I sank down, the note crumpled in my fist. Its ink smudged, the words somehow less certain now. Trust no one inside. What did that mean? No one inside the caravan, or no one inside my head? If the layout shifted, if the memories bled into reality, maybe I was the only one I could trust, and even that was questionable. A low humming began beneath my ears. Not outside, but inside me. Like a buzzing wire stretched too tight, vibrating with each heartbeat. I rubbed my temples, tasting copper as dry sweat coated my lips. The air felt heavier, thicker. Something about the way the ceiling slanted just slightly more than before, the way the light flickered in the dusty bulb above everything was wrong. I pushed myself up and moved. Steps unsteady, trying to map the caravan's twisted corridors in my mind. But the space refused to stay still. Hallways elongated, doorways appeared where none had been, then disappeared again like a bad dream. I caught glimpses of something or someone just beyond the curve of a wall. Shadows. Flickers. A breath, maybe. I stopped and called out, voice cracking, "Who's there?" "Please, I don't want to play games." No answer. Only the faint scraping of a chair against the floor somewhere deeper inside. The note in my pocket burned against my thigh. I pulled it out again, fingers trembling. There was more, a second page I hadn't seen before. Folded tightly, hidden under the first. I unfolded it carefully, the brittle paper whispering secrets. You don't leave because you can't. The caravan knows your fears. It feeds on hesitation. The more you resist, the tighter the walls close in. That line hit me like a punch. The caravan knew me? Knew my fears? I swallowed hard, feeling a cold sweat break across my back. That couldn't be literal. This was a place, a structure of wood and metal. Yet every shifting wall, every room that morphed, seemed eerily tailored to trap me. I sat down at the folding table, the surface sticky with dry coffee and something else I couldn't place, old sweat, maybe? The air smelled like stale cigarettes and damp fabric. I tried to steady my breath, but the caravan's atmosphere was pressing in, like a weight on my chest. I reached into my pocket again, pulling out the small tape recorder I'd found buried under the cushions earlier. I pressed play. Static crackled, then a voice, barely there, whispered through the speaker. You're already inside. No one comes out the same. Don't trust the layout. The memories are lies, shadows of your mind twisted by this place. The voice was shaky, broken, like someone speaking through a fog. I recognized it. It was me. But from when? A recording I'd made hours ago? Days? I couldn't tell. The tape stuttered and stopped. I pressed rewind, then play again. The voice continued, but this time it was different. Remember the man who sold you the caravan? He wasn't just a dealer. He was a caretaker. Or maybe a warden. He watches. Always watching. You think the shifting is random, but it's not. It's a game. And you're the prize. My skin prickled. How did I know that? Had I recorded it? Or was I losing time? I felt a creeping suspicion, a gnawing doubt about my own memories. The caravan wasn't just bending space, it was fracturing my mind. I stood abruptly, knocking over the chair. The sound echoed off the walls, but instead of reverberating back, the space seemed to absorb it, swallowing the noise whole. I ran my hands over the peeling wallpaper, rough and cold, and suddenly the faintest trace of a scent hit me, old tobacco mixed with something floral. Lilies? No. Something sharper, like the hospital ward where my mother had spent her last days. That memory slammed into me, unbidden and unwelcome. I blinked hard. The pain in my chest tightened. Stop it, I muttered. Stop making me remember things I don't want to. But the caravan didn't listen. It pushed, prodded, like a patient poking a bruise. I moved toward what I hoped was the kitchen, though the room, with its faint smell of dust and decay, stretched and shifted with every step. Cabinets appeared and vanished, drawers slid open by themselves, revealing empty spaces or old, cracked mugs stained with lipstick rings. The kettle sat on the stove, rusted and cold, but I could hear water dripping somewhere nearby. Tap, tap, tap. The sound steady, like a heartbeat. I bent down to investigate and found a small puddle of water pooling under the sink, spreading slowly across the linoleum. The smell of mold was overwhelming now, sharp and cloying. Crate, I whispered. Just what I need. The caravan had no plumbing, no running water. So where was this coming from? A sudden draft chilled the back of my neck. I spun around, half expecting to see the shadowed figure from before. Nothing. Just the dim, flickering light and the sickly scent of dampness. I leaned against the counter, heart thudding, trying to piece it all together. The note, the tape, the shifting walls. The man who sold me the caravan, he'd been vague when I bought it. His eyes too sharp, too knowing. I joked about the rumors, the so-called reality-bending stories. I thought it was just local folklore. But now I wasn't sure. The caravan wasn't supernatural. Not really. It was something worse, psychological. A trap designed to prey on the mind, to isolate and confuse. I glanced toward the window. Outside, dark clouds gathered, blotting out the stars. The wind picked up, rattling the thin aluminum siding. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, sharp, urgent. That sound felt different. Real. Grounded. Something outside this nightmare. I pulled my coat tighter around me and stepped back toward the main corridor, desperate for a way out. But every turn I made led me deeper inside a maze that I couldn't map or understand. The walls closed in again, the ceiling dipping, the floor shifting beneath my feet. Then I heard it. Not a creak or a tap this time, but a voice clear and close. Why do you keep running? I froze. The voice was calm but laced with something dark, something patient. No shadow, no figure in sight. Just the echo of those words bouncing off the warped walls. I swallowed hard. I wanted to answer, to shout back, but my voice caught in my throat. Who's there? I managed finally. Silence. Fog clung to the ground as I stepped into the silent stillness of the abandoned campsite, the air thick with forgotten stories. You don't get it, do you? This isn't just a place. It's who you are now. A cold wave of realization crashed over me. The caravan wasn't just bending space or tricking memory. It was a mirror, reflecting the fractured pieces of my mind, twisting them until I was lost in the cracks. No door meant no escape. No exit meant no end. I was trapped. Not just inside this caravan, but inside myself. And the worst part was knowing that I had chosen this. I had bought this prison. I had invited it in, thinking I could control it, understand it. But control was an illusion. The walls pulsed again, a slow, rhythmic throb like a heartbeat. The note trembled in my hand. The tape recorder lay silent on the table. The caravan whispered its truth. There was no going back. Only forward, deeper into the maze. The silence stretched, thick and unyielding. I stood frozen, muscles locked in place, ears straining to catch anything beyond that haunting question. Why do you keep running? The voice had no warmth, no urgency, just that cold patience, like a teacher repeating a lesson I wasn't ready to learn. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rattling the thin aluminum panels with a relentless rattle. I could smell the damp earth, the faint trace of something rotting, maybe leaves or old wood soaked through after the rain. The dog barked again, sharp and urgent, breaking the claustrophobia for a moment. It was real. Tangible. Not part of this twisted labyrinth. I swallowed, my throat dry and tight. Who's there? My voice was barely a whisper, rough as sandpaper. No answer. Just the echo bouncing back, mocking me. I forced my legs to move, stepping cautiously forward. The corridor stretched ahead, but it wasn't the same one I'd taken moments before. The walls narrowed, their faded wallpaper peeling like dead skin. The ceiling sagged ominously, and the floorboards creaked beneath each tentative footfall. I tried to map it out in my mind, left, right, straight, but the layout refused to hold steady. It shifted under my gaze, like the caravan itself was breathing, exhaling confusion. I pressed my palm against the wall. The paper was rough, grainy with age. I could feel the faint vibration of the wind outside, the subtle hum of something mechanical far off, but there was no way out here. Just this endless loop of corridors folding back into themselves, swallowing me whole. My hands trembled. I clenched them tight, nails biting into my palms. I couldn't let this place win. I had to find a way out. But the more I tried, the more it seemed to mock me. The memories, the fragments, they weren't mine, or maybe they were, twisted and tangled beyond recognition. I stopped by a cracked window, peering out. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with storm clouds. The caravan sat in a small clearing surrounded by dense trees that swayed and creaked in the rising wind. No lights from any houses, no sign of life except for the dog's distant, desperate yelps. Then, from behind me, the voice again, closer this time, almost in my ear, though no one was there. You don't want to face it. I spun around, heart hammering, breath short. Nothing but shadows and the warped interior. My knees felt weak, threatening to buckle. Face what? I whispered, voice trembling. Silence. The air grew colder, the dampness settling into my bones. I wrapped my arms around myself, teeth chattering despite the thin jacket. I had to stop doubting my senses. Had to stop letting this place tear apart my mind piece by piece. But deep down, I knew the voice was right. I was running from something far more dangerous than a shifting floor or cracked walls. From myself. A sudden noise, sharp and deliberate, a floorboard creaking behind the partition, snapped me out of my spiraling thoughts. I edged toward the sound, every nerve screaming to stay still, to disappear into the shadows. Hello? I called, voice cracked and uncertain. Is someone there? No reply. I rounded a corner and froze. The small kitchenette was lit by a flickering overhead bulb, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms on the stained linoleum. The sink was full of moldy dishes, the faucet dripping in measured rhythm. The smell of mildew was stronger here, mixed with the faint metallic tang of rust. And on the table, a folded piece of paper. I approached slowly, heart in my throat. The handwriting was jagged, hurried, the same I had seen in the faded notes tucked in the caravan's drawers. I unfolded it carefully. Stop looking for answers outside. The truth is inside. My breath caught. Inside. Inside what? The caravan? Me? A sudden wave of nausea swept over me. I sank into the worn vinyl seat, rubbing my temples. Head pounding, eyes stinging with tears that refused to fall. I didn't want to admit it, but the line between memory and reality was blurring. The faces I saw in the reflections, the voices I heard in the silence, they weren't strangers. They were fragments of my own past, fractured and bleeding into the present. A sudden knock at the door made me jump. Sharp. Insistent. My hand shot to my chest, clutching the fabric of my coat. Who is it? I called, voice cracking. No answer. The knocking grew louder, more frantic, as if someone or something was trying to break through more than just a thin aluminum wall. I moved away, breath shallow, eyes darting to the small window beside the door. Outside, the wind howled, bending the branches until they scraped like fingernails against the siding. But no figure. Nothing but the swirling darkness. I backed into the corridor, heart hammering like a frantic drum. The walls seemed to close in, the air, cold and heavy with silence thickening, pressing against my skin. I could taste the stale dampness, bitter and metallic. A sudden rush of cold hit me, like a gust sneaking through a crack. Goosebumps rose on my arms. The voice whispered again, softer now, almost tender. You can't hide. I swallowed hard, trying to force my mind back to reason. It was just the wind. Just exhaustion. The caravan was old, creaky, and my nerves were frayed. I had to remind myself of that. But then the hallway changed again. The door I had come through vanished. In its place, a mirror full length, framed in cracked silver. I stared at my reflection. Pale, wide-eyed, hair tousled. But behind my face, shifting, something darker. A flicker of a smile, cold and knowing. I blinked. It was gone. I stepped back, heart drumming. The mirror rippled, the surface distorting like water disturbed by a stone. The caravan was quiet, too quiet, as I sat on the battered bench by the tiny window, staring out at the cracked pavement and the wild grass pushing through the seams of the parking lot. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows that reached like dirty fingers into the rusted corners of the metal shell. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and uneven, a sharp contrast to the silence pressing against my eardrums. The smell of damp wood and something faintly sour, old upholstery maybe, clung to the air. I ran my fingers over the scarred tabletop, its roughness grounding me for a moment. I'd spent the last few days trapped inside this shifting maze, the caravan's layout changing as if it had a mind of its own. But that wasn't it. It had to be me. My memory. My mind. The endless loop of distorted recollections gnawing at me until I couldn't trust what I saw or felt. I closed my eyes and tried to reconstruct the sequence that led me here, to this moment. There was always a door, a hallway, a corner that twisted when I wasn't looking. It wasn't supernatural, no. Just the weight of isolation and the claustrophobia of this tiny metal box. The truth was, I was losing myself. I forced my eyes open, blinking against the dying light. The interior had shifted again since I last looked. The fridge was gone. Instead, a narrow passageway led to a curtained alcove where the old mirror hung crooked. The mirror. That thing had to be the key. Every loop, every memory shift, seemed to focus around it. I stood, the floor creaking under my worn boots, and moved toward it with hesitant steps. My reflection stared back, pale and hollow-eyed. The face I saw wasn't the one I remembered in the morning mirror at home. Lines I didn't recognize etched my forehead. My hair hung in unkempt strands. I wanted to wipe the glass, clear the grime, but my hands trembled. The mirror seemed to ripple, distorting my reflection further, like water disturbed by a slow breeze. I blinked hard and stepped back. "Enough," I muttered, though my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. The caravan's walls seemed to breathe around me. I caught myself leaning against a panel that felt warmer than it should, the heat pulsing faintly beneath the paint. My skin prickled. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that had settled deep in my brain. Somewhere, a clock ticked, slow and deliberate. Time. Was I still moving forward, or was I stuck in this endless loop like the caravan's shifting floorboards? I needed a way out. Not just physically, but mentally. I had to reclaim my sense of reality before the caravan swallowed me whole. With a deep breath, I moved to the door I'd first entered through, the one that had always led outside. But when I reached for the handle, it wasn't there. Instead, my hand struck cold metal. A panel, flush with the wall. I pressed it tentatively, and it slid open with a whisper, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. I stared for a long moment, the stale air from below curling up like a breath held too long. The only sound was the distant barking of a dog, sharp and sudden, slicing through the silence. I hesitated. Part of me screamed to turn back, to find another way. But the other part, the desperate, ragged edge of me, knew there was no going back. I descended. The steps were narrow and uneven, coated in dust that swallowed the sound of my feet. The air grew cooler, heavier with something I couldn't place, old earth, maybe, or forgotten things. At the bottom, a single bare bulb flickered weakly, casting long shadows that danced on the rough plaster walls. The space opened into a low-ceilinged room, cramped and filled with crates and forgotten furniture covered in sheets that smelled of mildew. I moved slowly, fingers brushing the rough fabric. Something about this place was familiar. Then I saw it, a small, battered suitcase, nearly hidden beneath a tattered blanket. I knelt and pulled it free, the leather cracked and dusty. As I unlatched the clasps, a folded piece of paper slipped out and fluttered to the ground. I unfolded it, hand shaking. The handwriting was cramped and hurried, ink faded but legible. If you're reading this, you're trapped. The caravan isn't just a home, it's a prison of your own making. The memories you chase aren't real. They're fragments, echoes of past regrets and fears. To escape, you must face what you've buried and let it go. My stomach churned. I crumpled the note, breath catching. Who had written this? Was it a previous owner? A warning? The words felt like a punch to the gut, but also like a lifeline. I sank back on my heels, the weight of it settling around me. I'd been running from something, my past, my mistakes, the parts of myself I never wanted to confront. The caravan wasn't bending reality. It was reflecting my own fractured mind, magnifying every doubt, every fear. I closed my eyes and thought of my father, how he used to sit by the fireplace, silent and distant, a man haunted by his own failures. I thought of the fights I'd had with friends, the loneliness that crept in afterward like a shadow. I thought of the choices I'd made, the roads not taken, the apologies never spoken. The caravan wasn't a trap. I was. I stood slowly, the paper clenched in my fist. The bulb above flickered once, then steadied, its light steady and unwavering. I knew what I had to do. Not escape the caravan. Escape myself. Back upstairs, I found the mirror again. This time, I didn't flinch at the distorted face. I looked long and hard at the person staring back. Not a ghost, not a trick of light. Just me. Flawed, tired, but real. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry for running." The walls seemed to hold their breath. The caravan no longer shifted beneath my feet. The door, my original exit, stood open, a sliver of twilight beckoning beyond. I stepped through, the cool evening air washing over me like a baptism. The scent of damp earth and wildflowers filled my lungs. Somewhere close, the dog barked again, a sound alive and certain. I didn't look back. The caravan sat quiet behind me, nothing more than metal and memories. No longer a prison. No longer a labyrinth. Just a place where I'd lost myself and, finally, found my way out. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift, just a little. Silence. Complete silence. Then, the steady rhythm of my own footsteps leading forward.